So welcome everyone to today's social system mapping deep dive session for July 18th, 2022. Oops, your hosts today are me, Christine Capper, co-founder of Sum Map and Greater Than the Sum. I think you all know that, I don't need to say it. And Kara Martner, who is helps me with all kinds of things. And today Jim Best is going to do a little bit of facilitating as well. So we wanted to acknowledge that up front. And so for those of you who are new to this, this community practice or this whole field of social system mapping, what this is, what these Monday morning sessions are, is really they're a vision about a possibility, the possibility being that social system mapping can make a difference. And this is about us learning how to, us leaning into and living into that vision, making that vision, that possibility true. So it's a new methodology and we're all still learning. So that's why I say it's about a possibility, because we're still figuring out how to make this happen, make this potential we see true. And so it's a learning opportunity for all of us to learn more about social system mapping, but also to learn more about I think of it as a bilateral learning opportunity in terms of, because it's a new methodology and because there's a lot for us to explore around how to embed the process into communities, how to get the most out of a map, how to help people learn how to use a map, how to design and hold the social process around the technical support system that a social system map is. That takes people from all different kinds of perspectives, from different sort of fields of learning, different cultural perspectives. And so this is an opportunity for all of us to learn all of that together, to explore that together. It's also a community of practice. So we're not just doing some learning, but we're also working, sharing our learning and practicing together and sharing what we're experiencing and discovering together. And social system mapping is the core of this community practice, but not everyone is making maps. Some of us are envisioning maps, helping introduce them to communities. Some of us are putting them together. Some of us are learning how to use them to weave networks and learning how to use them to make sense of our networks and to help our networks be more resilient and more complexity oriented and more interwoven. So that's what this is. This is one piece. There's a lot of parts to all of that. And we sort of chip away at that a piece at a time every Monday morning. So this is one small piece of that bigger puzzle. Let's see. So for today's agenda, we're going to do some welcome and introductions. Then we're going to do a session that was kind of, I've learned from, yep, it was multilateral, not bilateral. Thank you, Seth. A process for exploring a challenge that I learned from Glenda O. Young of the Human Systems Dynamics Institute, which is a systems thinking training institute, and one of my sort of favorite entrances into systems thinking, because it's very accessible and tangible and applicable. And Glenda started this process called answer. Oh, interesting. Oh, I did it backwards. It's supposed to be inquiry is the answer. So somehow my brain was working the other way. Anyway, so we're going to do an inquiry session, and we're going to do it on a thing that a bunch of us have been thinking a lot about lately, which is what I call the iteration challenge. And we'll get to that in a minute, but that's our main content for the session today. And then for those of you who are not familiar with how we do this, we have a formal session for an hour. So at the top of the hour, our formal plan will be done. But I always stick around for an extra half an hour, and a handful of us usually do, just for open-ended questions, just to get to know you, just for informal conversation. So if you want to stick around for that extra half hour, feel free to. So it's enough of me setting us up. I'm going to go ahead and ask you to put into the chat. So we're going to do chat introductions today. Put into the chat your name, pronoun, and location for starters. And this is an invitation. If I ever ask you to do something, such as go into a breakout room or put something in the chat that you just don't want to do, don't feel like you have to. There's no command performances here. We're all free to do what works for us. So we have a handful of people that have show up fairly regularly, which is great. And I love to see Denise and Jim and Mary and Seth and Tony. Oh, that's Anthony. Welcome from Cleveland. And Edem from Nigeria. Bart, who's in Geneva. And I thought from your accent before that you were from the Netherlands. So I was guessing that. So I was going to ask you, but I don't have to anymore. And Sophia from Sao Paulo. Welcome, everyone. Let's have you now put in, I'm going to stop sharing for a second, a primary network that you're working with. So, and welcome, Kiala. A network that is what is inspiring you to think about social system mapping, to be curious about it, wherever you are with it. There's probably some kind of network initiative in the back of your mind. So if you could share what that is, we'd love to know what each other's working on. A network for the advancement of Black communities, which is in Canada. It's important. American migration justice, nice. Nature movements, NORAG network, Africa region. NORAG is a education policy, global education policy network, showing up for racial justice. All of this, I love to see putting their networks into our chat every week, because it just reminds me of all the important work that all of you are doing, and I just appreciate all of that, and am honored to whatever degree we're able, this community practice is able to support that work and help you further that work. It's good. It's really important for us. Interesting, Anthony. Okay, last thing to put in the chat is, what is one major challenge that you face related to your efforts or your interest in social system mapping? So you might not have a sense of that yet, or it might just be, I need to know more, whatever it is. There's probably some kind of challenge inherent in it. And I say that because if there wasn't, then I would be worried that we're not doing our work. It's too easy. It's probably not transformational enough. The value proposition. Having the network map actors interact directly with the map. Yes. Terminology is all the writing. So Edem is, yeah, all brand new. Seeing what's actually happening. Okay, I am going to just go to, so I'm going to set up our activity, and then Jim is going to walk us through it. And the activity is called Inquiry is the Answer. And the premise is, I mean, we all understand that the power of a good question. We all understand that asking good questions is generally a lot more generative than trying to offer solutions. And even when we get to offering solutions, it's valuable to have looked at the problem from lots of different angles before we get to that point. And it can be hard to do. I have been really working on this business of questioning for several years now, and I still, you know, I have a conversation and I go away, and then I'm reflecting on it because I do a lot of reflecting on my conversations, and I realize, oh yeah, I missed an opportunity to ask a question. Oh yeah, I was answering there. I wasn't in inquiry. So I just noticed how much my own brain continually still goes to answers as opposed to deepening questions. And so I was really excited by what Glenda did at the beginning of COVID. Glenda has this whole big global community of human systems dynamics practitioners, and a lot of them work in healthcare, and a lot of them were sort of relatively in meltdown mode. COVID started. What do we do? It's chaos. It's just a big, big challenge for the healthcare industry. And Glenda started doing this thing every morning at 10 o'clock Central Time. She would do a half hour of someone in the community would bring a problem to the community, a wicked issue, hopefully, and they'd set it up, and they would just do this half-hour practice of getting questions from the inquiry from the community. So we're going to walk through it ourselves in a minute. And she started doing that at the beginning of COVID. She said she would do it every day. Like how long are you going to do this? And she's like, well, we're going to do it every day until it's not, it's either not useful anymore or COVID is over or whatever. And they still do it every single day and every single weekday, because it is so generative and so impactful. And so many people have just really found it valuable that more people have taken on the facilitation of it. And it just sort of has gotten a life of its own. So I really have loved watching that unfold in her community. And sort of sometimes I'm looking for opportunities for us to do that together in our community. So I'm going to hand it over to Jim now. And just Kara put a link in the chat if you want to look, if you want to see any of the recordings of the HSD inquiry sessions. There's a whole library of them now. And Jim, I think I'm done yammering. You can take it away.
Okay, thanks for that setup.
My screen, or do you want to do it?
Yeah, you could share your screen. That would be good.
Okay.
And I think it's slide 8. Yeah. So I've been in a few of Glenda's sessions and these inquiry sessions, and they're surprisingly rich. We're going to, Christine tuned me up 5 minutes before we got on about how to facilitate this. So this is hopefully a practice that you can take home and facilitate in your spaces. We'll see what a mess it is, or whether it goes well enough that you feel you can just pick it up and run with it. But basically, a player or somebody, this time it's Christine, she's proxy for all of us who are interested in mapping, have difficulties oftentimes engaging people out of their normal daily activities to map, to get on the map and to make it alive and so forth. So this idea of iterating, the iteration challenge of iterating, updating the map over and over is what Christine is bringing to us. But a lot of us have the same issue, most of us. So in the next slide, she's framed the issue in like 5 sentences, and we'll look at that. And then for 20 minutes, we're just going to generate questions, your questions about it. You're in inquiry mode. You're not telling, you're not interpreting, but you are asking questions that pick this apart and enrich in this space. And your questions can build on each other's questions. And no answers, no anything. We just do that for like 20 minutes. And then Christine will start to share reflections that it's bringing up for her, and then maybe for some of us that are core mappers, and then for the rest of us. So that's the game, and we'll have 10 minutes at the end. So here's the framing. I'll just read through them real quick, but you can look at them. So social system mapping gives us powerful insights, but they're only as relevant as the data we gather and how up to date and dynamic it is. The data comes from the map members, so we need the members to keep it up to date. Nobody else is doing this. It's participatory. We also need to keep the questions relevant that in the survey and for the map, those questions. And we need to update them periodically as well. So the map is alive. So here's the crux. It's hard to get people to spend a few minutes periodically updating their profile and their connections, unless the map is like an alive tool for them and they're seeing it as critical to achieving their purpose. It's difficult to have people spend that time, but it's key. So that's the question we're going for, essentially. And if enough people don't update their data over time, the map gets less relevant. So people are even less interested in keeping it up to date. So it spirals into irrelevance. Okay, so that's it. And again, how do we engage people in updating the map? So just some guidelines on the questions. Avoid advice in the questions. Represent your authentic curiosity. Just go to what's alive for you in terms of this, what you have curiosity about. Try to go for open-ended questions that generate open-ended responses. Address and or challenge underlying assumptions and expectations. Draw on information and context that's familiar to Christine. Draw on information and context that is familiar. Yeah, so don't stay so off in your world. Stay focused on this question and where Christine is coming from. And then be empathetic and supportive of Christine, the player, as a caring human being. So it's the nature of your inquiry is authentic and empathetic, going towards the question that the need that Christine is bringing to this. So hopefully that's clear enough.
Shall I leave this screen up on the shared screen just so people can sort of refer back to it?
How about leaving the other? I think people get this sense of these questions, but maybe not. But I was thinking maybe the earlier. Yeah. Yeah. So unless there are any burning questions, we want to jump into it, but let's take a second and see if there are any burning questions on the instructions here.
How are we processing the questions?
Oh, I'm sorry. What the questions that you generate go into the chat.
And
you
you'll
tell
call
me.
it. So you'll call. So you can start putting your questions into the chat as soon as they're coming up for you, like right now if you want. And then Jim will just call on you in order to voice your question out loud into the space so we can hear your voices, but we also have a record of all the questions.
Without a lot of iteration on the question, or
you mean
as they voice it?
No, just say the voice and just voice the question and move on. So we're not discussing any of this. We're not processing any questions. We're simply drowning in as many possible questions as we can get in 20 minutes.
And we're not elaborating, just
no.
Read your question.
I mean, make it clear, but don't elaborate it.
Okay. Anybody, no, it doesn't look like any burning questions here.
I think the third one, I think the very last one is one, but people go ahead and think about your questions and put them in the chat as soon as you have them. Sorry, Jim, I'm jumping in.
No, it's all good. And if you're willing to turn on your screen, it's so much fun to see your face while you're thinking about a question. But don't feel pressured. Thanks, Denise. Seth, read it.
Jim, there's one from Anthony. Anthony's third was a question.
Missed it, sorry.
Start with that one, sorry.
I think Anthony's got the microphone issue, so I'll read for Anthony as kind of a demo example. So
thank you.
How do you create small diagrams that tie together? And then Seth would read theirs next.
We're just reading our questions?
Yeah, we're just putting voice to.
So with regard to the second point that the data comes from map members, I'm wondering about the various different ways in which members provide such data, but maybe not directly to a question or in response to a map inquiry, such as having information on the websites, which we can gather independently. And what are the implications of using that sort of data?
Okay.
Jim, I'll call on you.
Do participants really get the value of the map? Denise.
My question was, have you been able to determine why they're not updating their profile? Like through a separate inquiry, they're just calling people or sending them an email or maybe a call. And if we could figure out if it's just that they don't understand the map or is it just too busy? Like, I just don't know where a starting place would be.
Adam, do you want to voice yours?
My question is, in a world of endless online engagement and activities, as well as numerous invitations for subscriptions, how does one incentivize completing / updating members' data on the social systems maps?
Mary?
I have two questions. One is, Christine, how do you engage with the map and share what you are seeing? And the other question related to Jim's is, what is the value in updating the map beyond the 5 points that are here? I think I heard you express that value in another session.
Ella?
Jim, when you're saying people's names, I can hardly, it's so quiet and
Okay.
non-plosive. I can hardly tell that you're calling on them. I'm not sure that.
Non-plosive, that's a new one for me. Okay, I will plose. Mary, thanks for your question.
It's not a literally applicable way of
No,
saying
it's perfect. I'm going to plose. Kiala, please.
All right. How can we make it more fun and meaningful for participants to update data?
Mm-hmm. And I'm up. Why are they initially excited to put themselves on the map? Mary.
I did it already.
Okay. Denise.
Yeah, my second question is, how often do you invite MAP members to a party or something fun like that to teach them the visual language of the map? Because I remember in your 17-minute video, you talk about the visual, like if there's a language to map making. So do we, how often does that happen?
Mm-hmm.
Seth?
Yeah, so the idea of updating the profiles and updating the map, I'm wondering if it's possible that sometimes people disassociate those two things as separate activities and don't think of the map when they're updating their profile or vice versa.
Mary.
How does updating the map relate to developing my practices in the social field?
Mm-hmm.
Fiona?
Is there a way to get map updating and review into an existing flow of work?
Mm-hmm. I'll go. Do people feel excited to add a friend, you know, whenever they meet someone in one of these online gatherings? Mary?
I think we fail to, no, that's a statement. I'm wondering how we can help people recognize that we're always changing, that the profile I filled out 2 years ago doesn't really meet who I am right now.
Mm-hmm. Seth?
I'm wondering if it, at least in certain circumstances, might be productive or counterproductive to let the map indicate whether certain members' data is current or old, has reached a certain age. And I don't want to shame anybody, but if that's an issue, maybe letting it be known how old something is something of interest. I don't know.
Anthony, can you read your question?
Might need Kara too.
I'll be Anthony again, standing in. Do the flow of work and then add notes as to who does what action.
Anthony was commenting on a previous question.
And I'm just gonna remind us that our goal is to be asking questions and not giving advice and not unpacking them or approving or disapproving. We're just generating questions as opposed to solutions here.
Kara, could you flip to that next slide so that we think about
this one?
Yeah, sharpening our inquiry here. What are you really curious about in this space? This is a knotty issue and central to the work that we do. Underlying assumptions, expectations. Denise.
Yes, my question was, what control do MAP members have over the questions asked of them to maybe determine the relevancy of the questions? Is there a box or something where they could say, we want to know this more instead of something else?
Mm-hmm.
Mary.
I'm thinking more about the root cause of our unwillingness to participate in this way often.
I'll go. This is piggybacking off of Denise's question. Do participants understand that they're invited to create the mapping questions? We've got about 5 minutes. Seth, go ahead.
I think the question of having people update information about people who have recently been added to the map is a particular challenge. I'm wondering if there's a way to inform map members about new map members more passively, like by an email that might say, do you know this person? As opposed to expecting them to periodically check the map.
I'm asking, what is the role of a network weaver in encouraging participants to engage? It's sort of piggybacking off of Seth's question about how do you let people know? How do people know that they're... Mary.
Do we need to do more to describe the map as in a dynamic way, as always changing, as a living map?
Jennifer, thanks for joining.
Yeah, I'm thinking I came to this because I'm working on a map for the systems that I'm working in. So what encourages me to come back to this map that is about like making maps?
We just have a couple more minutes, so if you haven't had a chance to put something on, put out a question, now's a good time to dig in. And of course, you can add questions after as they come up in our discussion. But
Kiala has one.
Right. Yeah. Let's see. Do we have opportunities for warming data and growing trust with the maps? It's kind of a Nora Bateson warm data reference there, but.
Can you expand on that term, warming data?
Yeah, well, it's a little bit of a play on words, but warm data is the sense that the meaning and the relationality is what would be the warmth in it, and so that's the short way of how I mean it.
Jim.
Do activities of actually using the map generate interest and engagement? Mary.
How do we see ourselves as part of this, as makers of the map, rather than as on the other end, respondents?
And Seth?
The communities we map are different, and I'm wondering if it warrants thinking about them in terms of how much we expect members to keep their data updated, and or how much we expect them to encourage fellow members to update their data.
Jim, are we ready to move to the next step?
Yeah, I guess it's time. If any other questions come up as we're having this discussion, feel free to put them in the chat. It's all rich data here. Okay, so let's start with Christine. Thank you, everybody, for all of those questions, those thoughts. And Christine, what are you thinking about? What's coming up for you as you look at these questions in terms of the challenge you posed for us?
Yeah, well, I posed this challenge because this is a challenge that we have a very small, this is a challenge that came up for me. Like, I started to really think hard about maybe a year ago and started to try and get others to engage with me around how do we do this. Maybe 9 months ago, and we've had some iterations of who's going to work on that and how we're going to work on that, because it took some time to find even a process. But Jim and Mary and I have been asking ourselves those very questions, a lot of those questions, and trying to figure out how to implement them in this community of practice. And so what was coming up for me was, first of all, there were some deep questions about there are questions about the value of the map, people seeing the value of the map, and the recognition that if the map isn't valuable to them, there's not much reason for them to update it, which makes perfect sense. And then how it becomes valuable to them is a big, there's the question of that, and being part of the mapping design, being part of the, one of the people who decides what the questions are, having input into making sure that the questions represent their point of view, their worldview, the worldview that they want to move into, as opposed to somebody's top-down concept of what the categories of interest should be, so that it's actually the whole map is generated in a way that in the process itself helps people feel their way into the value and find value in it themselves. And Kiala, I loved your question about how do we warm the data, because I think that's sort of like the succinct way of saying everything we've been trying to think about for the last 9 months is how do we not just design the questions and design the map, but engage with the whole thing in a way that it starts to feel meaningful. I mean, that it helps us find meaning that we can't see in other ways. But it's not going to happen by a top-down process. It's going to happen by a co-design, shared exploration, in a process of inquiry. So those are the things that were coming up for me, is simply that, and the other thing that came up for me is, like I said, we've been working on this for 9 months, and I'm just super aware of how we have weekly meetings. We have a meeting a week, And the evidence of the work that Mary and Jim and I have been doing is like been in, you know, a two-word snippet here and a two-word snippet there. And we're sort of creating a background process and a lot of shared thinking, and I'll share some of that with you in a bit, but it's still really hard to figure out how to weave it into our everyday practices, how to actually, like, I didn't start this session by looking at the map. We didn't start this session by talking about anything in it. And we will talk a little bit about the process, but we won't end this session in that way. So really, how do we weave it into everything we're doing is just a huge question. And it feels like that's, to me, where the value is. So I can be done. And then we were thinking other members of the mapping team, if anything was coming up for you, and then open it up to the rest of the group. And let me, before I'm sort of taking the facilitation reins from you, Jim. But I'm just acknowledging I'm doing that. So when we were doing this, Jim said I was a proxy player, and we were saying like I'm the holding thing for this process. But this is stuff that we're all always struggling with. So we want in a normal inquiry, we would just let the player answer their questions, and then that would be the end of the process. They would take their insights and run with them. Just pick some small, next step they could do and do that. But given that I'm being a proxy, we're opening it up, and we'll start with Jim and Mary because we've been close to this for a while. Whichever of you has thoughts wants to share what was coming up.
You want to go ahead, Mary?
You can go first if you want.
Okay. I was thinking, I haven't updated myself on this map, maybe a little bit, for weeks, months. What's with that? And so I'm thinking I would have loved to have done this whole session where anybody who's been on this map and hasn't updated does some inquiry about that, about like what goes on for you. And, I'm comparing this business about warming the data, two things. One, I got to a question there at the end of going like, what would cause me to jump out of bed to want to get on the map? Like sometimes if I'm in a Facebook exchange or something, I want to know what somebody has responded to this or that and the other, or in other online stuff. What would cause, is it even possible to have that sort of conversation with the map? Doing inquiry about what it's showing us or what it's showing me. So that was one thought. And the other thought was this business about warming data as I understand it. One of the maps Christine put in simply in the relationship questions, it wasn't a strength thing about how you relate to this. She asked, how do you have relationship with this person? Or how did you get to know them? Or what is the essence of your relationship? Kind of an appreciation. And when that data started coming onto the map, it was so interesting to see sort of the richer connections, maybe the warmer connections between people as they appreciated each other and exposed a window of their relationship. So it makes me think that something like that creates more engagement. I'm complete, Mary.
Well, I definitely think that questions are part of it, that it isn't just a question of engagement. It's multi-sided. And so there, as Christine mentioned, there's a lot of things going on, ways of that members of the community can propose questions. There's a way of proposing self-organizing projects and so on. So there are a lot of things going on. On a more personal note, I think it's challenging. It's challenging for me to place myself to update exactly where I am in this moment. But that could be the very reason why it's important to come back to the map it's, I don't know if I'm right, Jim, it's sort of like the 5 whys, or what's the question you keep on asking, who am I? Anyway. I think most of the people that come to sessions are in a very dynamic place, and you don't really see that that much on the map. So I guess one reason for me to engage with a map in a really authentic way is to be part of a community in a really authentic way. I think I've gone off the rails here, Christine, but I think questions are as important as the question of engagement, that they both have to be held at the same time.
If we had more time, I think we could have more inquiry in the whole group, but I think we're at the 10-minute point, Christine.
Yeah, thanks.
Back to you.
So I wanted to, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just to sort of help continue to, so this question is a question that is key to social system mapping. So as a social system mapper, as a developer of this methodology, it feels to me like this, if we can't really get deeper and wiser and smarter about this, then I don't know what I'm doing here. So so this for me is the crucial exploration. And so we will continue to hold this exploration. I've been writing about it. And so I want, Kara, can you, I might not have, can you put the iteration challenge piece in the chat? So this is just more sort of fodder for thinking about this in your own context. The point of today's inquiry was for us to practice coming up with questions. So it's just a process of practicing being an inquiry, especially when it's complex and confusing and challenging, and our minds just kind of want to shut down. So practicing being an inquiry was our main goal. The other main goal for me was for us to open this whole question of the iteration challenge up and to start to explore it together more broadly throughout the community as just sort of part of our community learning and development process. And so not just exploring it, but also for us to take action and do what it feels like are the appropriate wise next steps that come out of this inquiry, whether it's here today or whether it's in other places within our community. And so we have done our best to make, as Mary was referring to, so we have a new platform of information sharing. It's called CODA. And Kara, if you could just put the community portal link to CODA there. And so this is a place where you can give us input about questions or other pieces of the community. You can propose things you think we should do in the community. So if somebody thinks this was a really valuable process and I want to I want to host more of this, that would be a thing you could propose to do. And we will continue to try to figure out how to, in these weekly hour-long sessions, which are of necessity fairly short and designed both for brand new people and more experienced people, try to figure out how to weave some of the things that came up in today's set of questions, as well as have been just coming up overall, to weave more of that in. And so the invitation to you is, so Kara, if you'd put is the portal in there also, just like the portal landing page? Sorry.
I'll need that public link, which I don't have access to, so I can't grab that easy.
We'll put it in the follow-up stuff, but also, and you can find it in the link that Kara just posted. Would you put the community practice opt-in link and the get my link? So if you're in the map, we invite you now to go in, and we have updated questions. We've added some more recently. That's part of, you'll find all that in the portal. And so invite you to update your data, invite you also to put yourself on the map if you're not there yet. And so the sum of what I'm trying to say is we will continue this experiment. We would love to, invite you all to participate in it to whatever degree feels meaningful and relevant to you, that helps your own learning, helps your own development of your own mapping process. And whether you're helping us sort of process it or not, or engaging in the process, watching it, hopefully will give you some food for thought as well. Just, you know, staying aware of what we're working on, what we're doing. And that's, Mary or Jim, have I left anything out that I should toss in here? Into this beginning invitation to of us addressing the iteration challenge in action in our own community.
I think it's such a big question. It's just from being part of sessions over a couple of years, it's probably the primary question people ask. So it's just a question for all of us and sort of a reason to continue engaging in this question.
You know, I was thinking that for people that aren't on the map or are new to the map, it would be interesting to get on the map and to update it and to hold this question so that you're thinking about what is going on for me as I interact with the map, and then feed that back into the community. That would be valuable research that each one of us can do. So welcome.
And there's just one last thing I want to add, which is that we won't come up, none of us will come up with the answers, because every community is so different. Like to Seth, excuse me, to Seth's comment about communities are different and should we have different levels of expectations, and we should have absolutely, and the answers and the way the processes we use, I think that in an ideal world, we will find some principles that will help us, that we can apply in different contexts, but what we come up with in our community isn't precisely what you'll need to do in your community, but you can just sort of learn from the patterns and the principles and hopefully find your own ways of adapting them to your own context. So we're not looking for the answer to anything. We're looking for what are the patterns, what are the principles, what works in what context, and just sort of feed those back into each other so that we can all adapt them in our own context. For those of you who, I'm just noting that people might want to jump off a minute or so early, and I'm going to just jump into our goodbye ritual, which just takes a moment. And if you didn't hear me say this in the beginning, we'll close in just a moment. And then if you want to stick around and have informal conversation, if you've got burning questions, or you want to, just explore further with me and whomever else sticks around, just stay on the line and or stay on Zoom and don't jump off when we do the goodbye ritual, and then we'll leave it, we'll go wherever you want to go. And if you want to stick around for 5 minutes, that's fine. If you want to stick around for the whole next half hour, I'll be here, but this just is no open invitation to continue to engaging if you want. So I'm going to count down 3, 2, 1, or first we're all going to do the good, I'm starting the goodbye ritual, or the end of the release, bless and release ritual. And so I'm just going to count down. Oh, first we're going to unmute. So everybody go ahead and unmute that wants to do this. I will count down 3, 2, 1. When we get to 1, we just all at the same time give each other our blessings and our appreciation for the day. And then as soon as you're done with that, feel free to jump off and go on your way. So 3, 2, 1.
Thank you so much.
Hugs to everybody.
Bye-bye.
Hugs for the rest of your day.
Yes, hugs for the rest of your day. So cool. We have people.
I'm curious what for is it Edom?
Yes, correct, Jim. Edom. Well,
I'm curious what Edom and Denise and Antonio sort of what this brought up for how this might be useful to you in your work. this practice or these questions. But don't feel on the spot. I'm curious, and if you can answer, that's great.
I guess for me, some of the reflections that came up was I saw a comment where, you know, the question on would it help if we introduced like a fun method around, you know, data collection. So, I mean, for me, I was just thinking, I know it's very difficult on my side to get people to sit down for a few seconds to, you know, fill questions, surveys, not to mention updating, you know, the idea that I've done it already and then I have to revisit it. So I was just tinkering with the idea of, what could be a fun, you know, approach for professionals, especially people in the education sector who might sometimes be a little stuffy, you know, research inclined and things like that. What would be, you know, an approach there? Also, regarding the concept of warmth and meaning, just basically thinking around the idea. So my lens isn't really on creating the map, but on weaving the network, like strengthening, you know, exchanges within the network. So again, I was thinking of what like participatory activities could we, you know, introduce from time to time so that the map, the network is relevant, you know, like people derive such value from it that they just want to be, I mean, especially making reference to the story you shared about your friend who basically during the COVID pandemic, you know, created this culture of asking these questions and everybody bonded around that culture. So I was just thinking, like, what would that, you know, or what potential activities could one introduce that, you know, takes on a life of its own, that keeps drawing people back, you know, into using the map and even referring the map and just promoting the map, you know, that sort of thing. So these are just thoughts I was reflecting on.
Thank you.
I stayed on just to tell you, and thank you, Idem, for your thoughts as well, that I found this exercise of all the sessions I've been to the most valuable, to be quite honest. I loved that technique of what we just did, the inquiry. I had never been exposed to it. And the questions people were asking, I was just thinking about, because we're at the early stages of how much, it reminded me of how much work the map takes to keep it alive. And I think, and I first joined, I didn't realize how much work it took. And then when I met with the 4 people that you asked me, that you suggested that I meet with, Christine, I started learning that there's a lot of not only creative and fun ways, but as a network weaver, and like that is my role, is how do you, I have to remind myself to constantly go back to the map, maybe like every week, and share bits and pieces of it. So I had asked this question, like I love the questions, I thought it was general. I asked this question of everyone that I met, and they gave me different ways in which they engaged map makers, map members. But just having it, I was actually going to ask if we could have the chat saved or sent or posted to us in Slack or something, because a lot of the questions asked, it's like, oh yeah, how would we do this? How would we do that? How do we make it fun? How do we invite the questions? Like it was completely applicable to what I'm thinking about. And this is a lot more labor intensive in a good way, though, I think, than we realize. Like even questions like, made me think, maybe members need to know up front, we're expecting you to, as part of your engagement, not like a rule, like you're going to get kicked out, but to check every month, and we'll send you an email or whatever frequency we would like to be done. So it sparked a whole set of questions, is what I wanted to say. And I really enjoyed it. And I hope as a collective we do it. And it made me think, I don't even know, like until Kara just sent the link again, like I updated the map, but then it's not on I don't save it. Like maybe I'm going to save it on my browser page so that when I open my computer, it's part of my homepage or my homepage tabs. So even to tell other members to do that. So for me as a member, I need to do that because I just forgot about it. I went on it last week and I thought, oh, this is fun. And then I didn't go back. And I didn't even think about how to I was like, how do I even get back to the map? Where do I save it and find it? So, but this was great. This was really, really, I liked it a lot. I really enjoyed it. Thanks.
I like that you come at it, Denise, from the perspective of a network weaver. It's like, there's one thing as a participant to see your relationship to the map, but then a totally different thing to come at it as someone who holds the community, you know, and that's their intent, is to weave.
Yeah.
So, thanks. What are you thinking, Seth? I know that look.
Well, I've been a inconsistent periodic dropper inner sessions, and I always find them valuable. And I'm trying to think about why I'm not more consistent, but also to the question I think you posed before, Jim, and others. You know, when I look at the map, I do feel like it's in some ways a home community, a tribe of people that I want to get closer to and I want to engage more with, but I don't. And I was trying to think about what I want to get out of the community and the degree to which the map or the other tools, the Slack channel, these sessions might satisfy that. And one thing that came to mind was that, you know, I feel like I'm in an organization where I'm the only person thinking about this stuff and trying to advocate for it and champion it with other people who sometimes get on board, but I have to kind of drag them forward and continue advocating because it doesn't have enough momentum on its own. And I often come up with ideas and thoughts and stuff like that I want to further develop. And I'd like to find peers in the network aware community to bounce these ideas off of and stuff, but they don't feel well enough developed to have a session on necessarily. And I don't know enough people or feel comfortable just reaching out to individuals to say, hey, can we get together for half an hour so I can show you something, ask some questions. But I'd like a community in which I could do that. And maybe this is, and I just haven't taken advantage of it. But, you know, I would like to be able to just reach out to folks who either, you know Kumu or have tried to do certain things with their networks or whatever might be appropriate, and just, you know, find a couple of people and occasionally be able to just like ask some questions, get some feedback, and to provide that sort of function for other people as well.
Yeah, I feel the same inclination of wanting a little support group, and doesn't even have to be the same people. But, and I was thinking, so there's nothing to keep me from saying, hey, Thursday nights, I'll be here. I'm going to open up my Zoom. Anybody wants to jump on and talk about, you know, issues that are coming up for us. You know, here I am. I certainly, if people were intentionally taking on the role of network weaving, maybe that would be something they would do. But there's nothing to keep me from doing it if I wanted to do that. And so, you know, what are the thing it was making me think of is like, we come together for Mondays, and that's people coming in from the periphery into the core for that moment, as opposed to working the periphery. It's like, what are the connections that we have between each other that doesn't rely on the energy in the core, but just, you know, the ability to connect with each other across skills, across interests, across purposes, all the things that are on the map. You know, that's one of the things the map can provide. And, but I don't do that. So.
Thank you, Adam. Bye. Have a good drive home, if that's what I'm trying to I just wanted to see if Antonio wanted to, it's an invitation, and if you don't have anything you want to say, that's fine too, but just intentionally open it back up in case. One thing that's coming up for me as we're talking is how much the challenges that we're facing are the key. So the challenge, like they seem like just sort of small, teeny tactical challenges around updating a map. But if we dig into it from just about any angle, we discover that actually these challenges have to do with much deeper things that are really indicative of our paradigms or our assumptions, or of things like power dynamics that we were not aware of, or things like representation issues that we hadn't thought of. And so, or things like our own sense of agency and initiative, like Jim just saying, like, why don't you reach out to, like, if you want people, if you want like more of a sounding board or more, a group thing, why you could do that and why don't you? And so all of them have value in the exploration of them, in questioning them and probing them, value that, from it seems to me, and it's my experience so far in this context, the map benefits from, but the deeper benefit is beyond the map. The deeper benefit is us having a better understanding of how to work together, how to create things together, how to shift unconscious power dynamics, or how to shift paradigms. And to me, so any challenge, it's like I'm starting to get to the point where it's like any challenge that comes up, I'm like, we should do an inquiry around that. Yes, okay, Jim, why don't you? Can we just ask you a bunch of questions? So I just feel like this practice of, using a map as sort of a foil, just a thing that we use to help us stumble. It's almost like a thing that we can use to help us stumble so that we can find what we need to unpack and explore. That's just coming to me now as we're talking. Go ahead. Yeah, I'll shut up. Yeah, go ahead, Mary.
Sort of related to that, just in some work I'm doing, I noticed so many of the quotes from what I've read have to do with this transition into the unknown. And so many things came up about that it made me realize that it's just very difficult, I think, for people to enter into and value entering into the unknown. So you just said map as a foil. So the map is part of entering the unknown, and our sort of operating assumptions tend to be of really needing to get specific things, or how do I add to my toolkit very specific things. And so I'm sort of pondering sort of the transition, and I think the human systems dynamics and mapping help us move into this space that's unpredictable, or of unknowns. But we have to have a real curiosity and willingness to value that and want to go there, I think. Or that's the deeper issue, I see, around assumptions and stuff.
I got a quick gem from what you said, Christine, just a moment ago. It's like map as foil. Yeah, my tendency is to focus on the map. What can we do to engage people on the map? And it's really about what can I do to engage myself in the community? What are the relationships that I need and want to build in this community? And how can the map help me? So that's useful. Thank you.
And I think something that Mary had said earlier in the questions that resonated with me too, not only is the map as well, like Christine said, was this idea that maps are living entities. Because I think just the way we study maps in general, like in geography from students, we see them as static. So it's to shift the mindset as well when we're introducing the idea of the map to people, that it is a living entity, and what thrives are the relationships that we're talking about. And it's to shift the kind of our cartography, kind of like something you draw, it's static, it doesn't change because land masses don't change kind of thing, or only out of wars or whatever, like the way that we just think of a map, period. When we hear the word map, forget about network mapping. So I think like my takeaway also is just to think about this as, and when I would say selling it, when speaking about it, is to constantly remind myself and others that it is a living entity and the relationships are at the core. So yeah, but this has been great, but I am going to jump off now. And I will see you all, I guess, not the following 2 Mondays from now, right? Because it's not next Monday, the following Monday. Yeah, okay. Okay, great.
Thank you.
You all. Okay.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Good to see you.
Yes, thanks.
And something that Denise just said makes me think of Google Maps, which, you know, there's a static component to it, but you can see the traffic building, you can see it shutting down, blocking, rerouting, you know, it's like, that's a great metaphor. It's on a different time scale, but.
Yeah.
Denise's comment also sparked something for me where at my organization, which is a global nonprofit, we've been committed for some time in terms of systems analysis and systems mapping. And sometimes people put great effort into creating a systems map of causes and factors and how they relate to one another in some kind of area of peace building or justice and stuff. But they become very static, and they shouldn't be. Of course, the systems are dynamic and change, and those systems maps should change accordingly. But the tendency is to make the pretty picture and put it on the shelf and check the box that it's been done. And I think the same thing happens with network maps.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the tendency that I've been pushing against since, you know, I mean, that was the there was once upon a time that was sort of technically necessary because it was really hard to get like network maps, like to redo it. It was really hard to redo them over time. That was part of the intentionality in designing some map, was that to reduce that technical bar. So I've been pushing against that static map concept, or that, you know, pretty picture that you put in a drawer concept for, you know, since we began this. But I've come to the profound conclusion that the technology is, there's still some tweaking we could do to make for the technology to make it easier, but it's really a social problem. It's not, it's much less of a technical problem and much more of a social challenge in my mind. Yeah. Well, Jim, I just want to, I also meant in that building relationships, but also discovering our sticking points, or discovering what's not working, like discovering the gap between our own assumptions and the reality on the ground. Like there's all of these challenges built into a social system map that mostly point to deeper things that aren't so much about the map, but they're more about our like, you know, tendency not to really think about relationships. I mean, you know, like our tendency to think in terms of nodes as opposed to kind of, I mean, in any context, not just people, but like the interrelationship, like the interrelationality of everything is not Newtonian. It's, you know, it's, and so there's like just all these underlying beliefs that we have that a map can make us stumble over or make us get stuck on. And if we recognize that as maybe that's about our beliefs and not a technical issue, that's partly also what I meant. That's how I'm starting to see it myself, as an opportunity to dig deeper into the thinking that makes me believe that this is a problem. Like, this is a problem. Well, is it, or is you know? am I expecting something unreasonable, or am I approaching the whole thing from the wrong angle, and that's why it's a problem? Anyway, that's kind of what's been coming up for me lately.
Mm-hmm.
I need to drop off, but this was fun and interesting, and thanks for encouraging me to play a part in it today, Christine.
Yeah, thanks for facilitating.
Yeah.
It sounds like, Jim, something sparked in you also. Yeah.
I always get sparked in this community.
Yeah, that's true.
All righty. See y'all.
Okay.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
bye.
Yeah.